Breaking news tonight, a medical examiner is being called to the scene of an abandoned vehicle in Norman, Oklahoma, believed to be involved in the case of missing 7-year-old Asia Johnson and her slain mother, Tanya Hobbs. An Amber Alert was issued for 7-year-old Asia Johnson in late January after her mother, Tanya Hobbs, was found dead inside an RV camper. The just located vehicle is said to match the description of the vehicle driven by Tanya Hobbs's estranged husband, Lester Hobbs, who's wanted in connection with the murder of his wife and the kidnapping of Asia Johnson.
Even though we got hundreds of leads of people who thought they had recognized either the car or Asia or Lester Hobbs, we could never positively identify any of those leads coming in. So we always had the idea maybe he didn't get far. We do believe that they had been there for quite some time, not necessarily right after Lester killed his estranged wife, Tanya, but sometime very close to that.
I think deep down we all knew, and it's better that Asia's with Jesus and didn't have to endure anything from Lester other than what she did. You just take comfort in the fact that baby's with Jesus, and we'll miss her. That she's with him, and she's comforted.
I'm Pat Lalama sitting in for Nancy Grace. Devastating, heartbreaking, and developing as we speak the case of 7-year-old Asia Johnson, presumably and allegedly, let's state that for the record, abducted and murdered by Lester Hobbs, a man with a long and violent history. Eleanor Odom, prosecutor. Here's a guy with a huge history. Here's people taking out restraining orders here and there, and yet we know the bottom line. You know, your hands are tied as a prosecutor when, in fact, the parties don't live up to their own claims. I mean, again, I don't want to blame the mother for all the horrible things that have happened, but our understanding is she took out a restraining order on this guy and then didn't show up for the hearing, then chose to be with him afterwards, and only bad can happen in those cases. Am I right?
You're so right, Pat, and unfortunately we see it time and again where, and it's usually the women, don't show up for hearings or allow the perpetrator back into their home and in their lives, and this cycle of violence is just so devastating, as we've said before. But you know what? It's in his nature. He was not going to change.
And Peter Odom, defense attorney, you know, your hands are tied in a way as a defense attorney if, in fact, the parties you're opposing are not doing anything to continue their complaints, to keep them going. I mean, I'm sort of asking you to speak on the other side of the aisle, but you know what I'm saying? If you were representing this guy Lester, all you'd have to do is say, hey, you know what? The wife wanted him back.
Right, and that's often the case, where the person that initially takes out a restraining order, you know, the domestic violence perpetrator will start with their hearts and flowers, they'll get back together, and you know, defense attorneys are able to walk into court and say, well, they are back together, and judges are often very accepting of that argument.
But Jeff Gardier, why? Judges know it is so easy for vulnerable women to fall into the trap of saying, okay, honey, I know you're not going to beat the crap out of me one more time.
Well, yeah, what we normally see here, the judges are thinking with their minds. They have to do this legally. They see the people back together, as your previous guest has said, and they have to go with that. But in their hearts, they know that these women drop these orders, don't show up to court only because it's part of that cycle of violence, the dependent personalities. These guys are apologizing 1,000,000 times over, and the women fall for it every time because they come from cycles of domestic violence, because they have these self-esteem issues.
Yeah, and
they're hoodwinked.
It's almost like an alcohol addiction, isn't it?
Absolutely. And talking about alcohol, one of the things we know about this guy, Lester Hobbs, is that he was an alcoholic. All these DUIs, DWIs, and so on, I think that also contributed to his violence and picking on this young girl who allegedly was beaten by him in August several months ago.
And Alan Ripka, it explains that split-second rage in a way, doesn't it? That I'm holding hands with my wife at the Walmart just a few hours earlier, and boom, she's dead.
Yeah, and that goes directly to this. And I have to say, regardless of what Tanya would have done, had she shown up for the hearing, had she taken out orders of protection against this guy, based upon his conduct, the way he killed her, there was nothing that was going to stop him. She couldn't lock any door that would have changed things here. So I don't think we ought to be blaming her at all.
No, and there is no blame here. I just want to try to dissect the dynamic of what makes women in particular do this. Dr. Marty McCary, excuse me. Did I get that right, sir?
Yeah, McCary, right.
Yeah, forgive me. You are a physician and professor of public health at Johns Hopkins. I know I've spoken to you before, and thank you for joining us. Cause of death, how important is that going to be to this case?
Well,
And cause of death,
central.
time of death. Cause of death and time of death.
There could be a very strong correlation in the method or mechanism of death. You know, we know that Tanya Hobbs was 37, and according to the state medical examiner, she died from blunt force trauma. That could have been, who knows, a fist, hammer, pot, pan. You know, there's certain common patterns, and when two people have similar types of burn injuries or hammer injuries or, you know, injuries from a golf club, then it's much easier to connect them. This girl was 7 years old, not seen for 2 months. Really, anything's possible.
And in terms of forensic clues in that car, what will investigators need to find?
Well, definitely they're going to look at air samples. If there could have been a 2-month window, there could be a potential for a long decomposition with significant decay and bacteria. That then gets aerosolized or it goes into the air, and air samples can be critical. They'll be looking at the standard DNA.
The car was found earlier today. A call was made into the Norman Police Department, Norman PD, as well as OSBI and the U.S. Marshal Service. Has been out there, looked at the car. It is confirmed it is the car that Mr. Hobbs used in kidnapping Asia Johnson, the daughter of his estranged wife, whom he killed, we believe.
Asbestos exposure may cause mesothelioma.